Right, I think we should get started. So, welcome, Chase. Thank you for joining us today. I think this is our fourth webinar.
Yeah, I think we're rolling up on 4 or 5 now. I don't know. It seems like every time we kick off the new year or something or a major event happens, we get on the phone.
Yeah, well, major events nowadays seem to be every week, so it's almost difficult to keep up with the big cybersecurity events, let alone all of them.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the bad thing to kick off because it's what, 2 weeks into January, and we got the Russian sort of Ukraine thing going on, and there's some stuff bouncing around there. I'm just sitting around here like biting my fingernails right now.
Yeah, waiting for someone's going to fund all those weapons. So cyber attack seems like the easy, the easy choice here.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about major things. I mean, we finished out last year with Log4j, and unfortunately, when we hear about vulnerabilities and breaches and problems, that they often tend to happen, and then they follow a news cycle and then they go away. But something a bit concerned about this one in that it's not one piece of software, it's thousands of pieces of software. And I don't think the threat's going away anytime soon. I think I think we're going to see applications, because it's up to the vendor to update the software. We're going to see applications running that vulnerability, potentially becoming entry points for ransomware and cyber breaches and other things for possibly years to come. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's still the I guess you'd call it the trickle down cyber side of things, where it's we wrote about this a few years ago, was that the bad guys, the adversaries, were going to move kind of downstream and look for ports of entry and be able to kind of continue that access. I think what's really interesting to me is you don't see a lot of stuff showing up as far as the major mega companies anymore. And I mean, what does that mean? That means that they've kind of got their head kicked in long enough. They took some time and figured out ways to not be the easy target, but all the bad guys do is shift to the next slow gazelle on the Serengeti, which is everybody else. And now being able to move through service providers, that's a perfect place to be. I run my Shodan search every morning. When I wake up and come in here and get my coffee, Shodan tells me what's out there and what's compromisable. And so far, it doesn't look good for the home team.
Yeah, it's well, and I think the problem is with some of these vulnerabilities as well. It's not something that all the vendors could have necessarily done something about. Now, when we think about source code development, we think about what's the risk. Whenever we add third-party components into our system, we're essentially saying, okay, I need this component to help me with this function. And the risk of this is there's something else in this component that does something that I don't want it to do, like eat my data. And the Log4j situation is a perfect example of that, because there are thousands of products. I mean, everything from FedEx to, I mean, we've seen components that synchronize Ford cars in car dealerships, to healthcare software, to things like Unify, and everything that's running this software. And the problem is inherently they've done everything textbook right. They've chosen a solution, they've made sure it's the latest version, and then suddenly, oops, there's a vulnerability. Now, the problem is, if there's a vulnerability in Windows, Microsoft patches it and it's gone. I mean, everyone says, hey, you have to run your Windows updates. But if you're a hospital now, I sat on a call with a bunch of customers, because one of the things we show in our portal is which software is running the vulnerable versions of Log4j. And we pulled a list of all the software, and there was like 150 apps for one company. Like, well, what am I going to do with that? So they went off and tried to update them all, but they couldn't, because the vendors haven't released patches.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because I just did a bunch of stuff on Capitol Hill, and there was a lot of conversation going on around vulnerabilities and software and whatever else. I think there's a White House invite now that's up for open source, and I had to keep reminding people that it's not necessarily about how much vulnerable stuff there is. That's kind of a given. It's really like whether or not there's a weaponization avenue for the vulnerability. And when you're looking at something like Log4j or some of these other ones that are out there now, especially that move through service provider world, like those are radioactive, and those are the ones that have to be dealt with ASAP. And you can't count on the provider, the vendor, whoever wrote the software to fix it. I mean, they'll get to it when they got time. I mean, honestly, it's not their problem anymore.
Well, and it's funny to say, they're the radioactive ones. They're the ones that are affecting us now. And you know why? Because there's a manual on how to hack it. Like if you want to go and find a vulnerability in a piece of software, it may be very, unless it's schoolboy kind of SQL injection type stuff, it's going to be very hard to find it because you have to know what all the code does. You have to think of ways to misuse it because I mean, a vulnerability is essentially a misused feature, but when there's a patch for it, when it's already been fixed, when it's already been disclosed, and there's an active exploit, if you're a bad guy, if you're a hacker and you want to get access to that, you just go online and say, how do I
and go to YouTube?
Yeah. I mean, we'll do little tasks here where we'll just say, okay, here's a task for the junior of the support people who can break this first, and they go onto YouTube and it's like a race to, can we get it in half an hour? Can we get it in 20 minutes? And it's very easy. Whereas the unknown stuff is obviously a little bit trickier. I mean, obviously the whole theme of 2021 seemed to be, lots of ransomware, but lots of entry points from applications. It was always about applications being exploited and being used against us. And I feel like that's continuing into 2022, whether it was SolarWinds Orion, we saw the Kaseya incident, we saw the Office. I mean, the one that I don't think got nearly enough press was the vulnerability in Office. That, and I don't know if you played with that tool, but essentially when you open the document, it could download an executable and run it without you even enabling macros.
Which is not cool at all. Like that's what,
Yeah, or call out to PowerShell or do whatever it wants with no impact from the user. It's as we go into 2022, I feel like software vulnerabilities are going to be, we're training our users, we're getting better, but there's going to be more and more vulnerabilities in software. So we're going to be at a point where we say to people, don't open an email. Well, how do I not open my email? Because I got to do my job.
Just go back to sending people letters. Like we'll just do that because it's. I mean, and the stuff that we're seeing is, I just submitted a paper to an organization that I crawled through like every major compromise for the last year, and I literally went through line for line what happened, how the technology went wrong, whatever. 9 out of 10 of them for this whole paper were two things. It was either applications doing things that applications shouldn't do, like invoke PowerShell and do those other things, or bad passwords. And it was funny because I'm always dealing with folks that are talking about how to stop these nation states and whatever else and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, let's deal with bad passwords and excessive application stuff. Other than that, like we can get to that later. This
passwords and PowerShell.
Passwords and PowerShell, like that should be a ZT World thing. Is T-shirts say passwords and PowerShell?
There you go. Maybe someone in our marketing department is listening on the call, and
right? They can change
that. They can change that Zero Trust World T-shirt to passwords and PowerShell.
Passwords and PowerShell. Yeah. The two P's of failure. Yeah. Passwords and PowerShell.
We have a sign on our wall in our kitchen here in the office, and it literally says, it's got the emblem here. And underneath it says, stops PowerShell eating your lunch.
That's right?
Literally will eat your lunch every day.
Yeah, if you can invoke PowerShell from something like it's great that PowerShell is as powerful as it is, but it's, most of the folks that I've worked with post-breach, they don't even know that PowerShell is a thing. And it's like, well, why the hell was it allowed to operate in your environment? Well, I don't know. Well,
every application, or not every, but lots of applications use it. It's not something you can turn off.
Yeah,
black or white.
Or you at least have some sort of like, that's what you guys do well, right? Have some sort of boundary around things and go, this shouldn't happen.
Yeah, well, I think that's it with every piece of software. And if every piece of software you run on your computer can see all of the data you can see, it can see everything you see. So if you've got, I'm on the Zoom link, and in the bottom, I've got some Logitech or something popping up saying it's a camera app. So that Logitech app can see all my files, and, written in Taiwan. And it's somewhat of a concern that you think everything I'm running has access to all my data. Even if I'm not an admin, it can see all my data. It can make changes to my data. And when we think about things like PowerShell, these things are designed to do really powerful things. So if they get misused, then that access now becomes into a big problem.
Well, and you're starting to see the same sort of stuff populate within Linux and Mac too. It's not PowerShell, but there's these, I was reading a paper that was published like last week or so about software vulnerabilities for Mac, because for the longest time, people have said, I have a Mac. They kind of like put their nose up a little bit and say, I have a Mac. There's no way you could hack my amazing Mac. Steve Jobs' soul is inside of this computer and it won't let you get hacked or whatever. But now they're starting to have the issues that you see in PowerShell and with Windows, and There's a Linux thing that's now starting to bubble up in there. So it's no longer just the poor schleps like me that are using a Windows box. You know, the Mac people are getting it too.
Well, I mean, that's one thing, I have that conversation too. They have their nose up and and say, "I'm sorry, Mac, and we can't get like." I mean, one guy said to me, literally, Macs can't get viruses. They're literally a different type of beast. And you kind of have to remind people that viruses are software. And one of the great things that make computers great is that you can create software for them, which is why we can do everything from running our payroll to healthcare to design to writing antivirus software or zero trust software, you know, and we can do all that because these operating systems are open and they can write software. A Mac, just like a PC, just like a Linux operating system, all have that ability to run software. So anything that can run software can get owned, and anything that can, any piece of software you run can own all your data. And I think making sure you limit what software can do and you choose your software carefully to what should be allowed in my environment, you balance that. Look, you've got to take risks, but do you want to take a risk to save 20 cents on a pack of butter for a coupon clipper?
Yeah, and it's also in the realm of protect. I mean, because I do the workshops and talk to people about, let's forget about cyber. Let's just think about your house, right? There's my house and my neighbor next to me. And my house, I have a Doberman and I have, you know, big, you know, ADT sign out front and prickly bushes and whatever else. And it looks like a place that you wouldn't want to kick the door in, right? Or my neighbor's house where they've got everyone is welcome sign, the doors are wide open, and they have Chihuahua asleep on the front porch. Like, which one do you break into and rob? It's the value
picture of you outside your house. Okay.
the value of deterrence is a real thing, you know. Yeah. I mean, it's
the cost of
business is good.
It is the cost of doing business. I mean, if you're a cyber criminal, your job is to get into people's houses. I remember back in 2003, 4, 5, 6, spam was just like, and spam's still a problem now, but pumping Viagra emails out isn't a very effective business model anymore. People aren't buying
those aren't legit. Oh
yeah, but like if you actually look at how much it went up and then it just started to go down, it was like, this is too expensive and no one's clicking on it. And if you can do the same with software, then if you can say it's just too hard for me to get to run my software in their environment, I'm not going to bother trying, then you win, because it's more expensive to hack you than it is to hack somebody else.
Well, and the you know, if everybody always wants to kind of wrap their head around to the nation state side of this, because that's the sexy cool stuff. Look at what's going on with Russia to Ukraine, and the fact that there was the sort of pseudo attack this week where they went after CMS system. And once they got on there, they did things and dropped into other capabilities. But really the point is, what did they do? They used software and they used things that software shouldn't have been able to do to push control out into that infrastructure. I mean, that's nation state. Like, that's literally preparing for an invasion, you know, between Russia and the Ukraine. That's what you do. Like, this is the pointy tip of the spear. And the same thing happens to nation states that happen to those of us that work from home.
Now, back to this Log4j thing, I wanted to, you know, we talk about all the power of PowerShell, and I feel like software has become this, we're going to keep jamming features into it and make it more powerful, which is great if we want those features, and they're there, they're on by default. And if we look at these components, and there's lots of them, and it's not just Log4j, and they're really super components. And I think we're going to see a change in that. If I'm going to say the way software companies change, we're going to start seeing a change where components aren't installed by default, where they're not ran by default. Because if you think about Log4j, there's probably tens of thousands of lines of code in that do all sorts of crazy great stuff. And most people who opt in to take components, they do it because they want to achieve a certain thing. They want to say, okay, I need to be able to, I mean, knowing Log4net, I assume it's similar. I want to be able to write to a log file, and I don't want to have to worry about file locking and things like that. I want someone else to deal with that for me. And it's great because all I have to do is, you know, I know in .NET, I just say, nu get me my package, and now I can pipe in that command. The problem is what I just did when I added that in is I saved myself 40, 50 lines of code. And we may decide that was too hard for me to write. In exchange, I added 30,000 lines of code into my system, that of which 29,960 aren't going to be used, and it might all be the best and the cleanest code in the world, but I just took on more code than I needed to save myself half an hour in time. So I think as we look at software, we have to think from an IT perspective, because that's what most of our audience are. We have to think about, well, we don't have control what developers do, period. We have to check that they're doing a good job. We have to check that they're patching their code. We have to check they're not running vulnerable versions. But in addition to those, to making sure that, we need to say, we got to assume the developers have done a poor job. And we got to limit what applications can do. Can they see other applications? Can they call on PowerShell? Can they access my data? Because if they don't need to, just don't let them. I mean, just ring fence them and say, turn this shit off and it won't eat my lunch then.
Yeah, and I mean, and I'm one of the worst, because originally when I was first doing this stuff out of the military, like I was the guy flipping tables over at developers about don't put this in the code and whatever else. In reality, that's not fair to them. Like they should be deving code and shipping code because that's what they do. The security controls that we have in place should negate the ability for a developer to have a whoopsie. And like you said, the software is going into this realm of anybody anywhere can pull a package, can put something. It's blocks of code that are being used to do different things, and it's not secure. It's great for deving. It's great for building features, and you can wake up tomorrow and have the next great idea for geolocating dog poo on your morning run or something. But it's introducing vulnerabilities, and it's going to continue to do that at greater speed.
And all we can do as consumers is limit the amount of stuff we're adding to that's what's producing real value to our business. Now, yeah. I think controls are what makes humans behave. I mean, I drive into work every morning and I drive 7 miles over the limit. 7, because I know the cops won't pull me at 7 miles over the limit.
Right, at 7, they're not going to bother. At 15, it's a different story.
Yeah, so I know that the speed limit, I mean, if the speed limit was 45, I would go 52. If it's 30, I'm going 37. And I set my car to beep at me when I get to 7 miles over the limit. And I just stay behind that limit. And the reason being is because there's a tangible control and there's a penalty for me doing something wrong. Now, the problem is the penalty for me doing something wrong is I'm going to get a ticket or whatever. I'm going to get paid $150. And me going 7 miles, it's probably not going to end the world. Now, if I do it by school, it might do, but if I do it just on the general road, and that's why they put those restrictions in place and they put those penalties. Now, in the real world of cyber, you doing something wrong, you opening something that you shouldn't do, you having a weak password, that you don't often get second chances to that. You don't get 3 penalty points on your license because you broke the rules. You get, oh, my business is toast. And I see this over and over again. So I feel like if we're thinking about cybersecurity over the next year, whether it be what applications can run on my machine, whether it be what people, enforcing strong passwords, we have to think about how many controls can we put in place to direct what our systems can do and what our users can do. And the more we can guide them and keep them on their path, the better. So, things like, passwords, we can only have so much control over passwords for users. We can put, checks in that say you can't have double letters in a row, you can't, or 3 letters in a row, you can't put 1, 2, 3, 4, you can't, it has to be X long, it has to be this amount of detail. But the reality is users are going to be bad because people just do the least they have to do.
We got other stuff to do. Yeah. I mean, it's, and people like to take the easy route. Like, that's why people don't wear seatbelts and get in car wrecks. Like, people do things that aren't exactly the smartest plenty often.
So if we think about controls, something as simple as dual factor authentication on your Office 365 account is the difference between someone's password being broken and then someone getting into their OneDrive and putting an executable in a folder, which now replicates to the whole company, and someone opening that and you turning into a ransomware shit show, as well as all your data being stolen, to nothing, like to, someone got a push on their phone.
Yeah,
and
what was that login? Weird.
Yeah, and we don't have control, as an IT person, we don't have control over whether the user has a strong password. We do have control over what happened, over the push to their phone. We do have control over other things. The same applies to applications that run. If we put controls around only these can run, and then the IT department, the security department, the MSP, they have the controls to stop them doing more. Same with our firewalls. How long ago? 80s? we decided we're going to put firewalls on networks. And we didn't go out there and say, let's do this wonderful thing and put in a great IDS IPS system with laser beams, eyes that find all the bad guys.
AI and robot owls or whatever those things are.
We put simple controls in place. And if we can focus on that in our security over if we think about going into 2022, what do I need to do? And if we stop going through this rat race of I'm going to put more magic, because guess what? Magic doesn't exist. The only thing that's magic is how fast your data can get encrypted on an M2 solid state drive. But everything, it really doesn't exist. So if you think about what can I do to tangibly protect myself, and think about actual tangibles to real problems, I think that's where we win on a security basis. Not I've just bought the best EDR in the world.
No, I mean, the tools are cool. The tools are useful. And I mean, there's some good stuff out there, but the majority of what you really need here, and I work with orgs on setting this up all the time, is think from the adversary's perspective. I think really that's one thing that's kind of gotten lost on a lot of people, is they get so focused on perfect defense that they don't really think about what the adversary needs to be successful. And if you remove any one of those things that the adversary needs to be successful, you are taking back the initiative. And I don't have to win all the time, but I've got to win enough that you as the bad guy, it's just not worth your effort. And a lot of the things that you need to do are really not that crazy complicated. Like, you don't have to be, a mega brain to do this stuff. If the adversary needs you to have PowerShell enabled, disable PowerShell. If the adversary needs you to, have excessive privileges, get rid of excessive privileges. Like this stuff is really from the perspective of the bad guy side. Yeah, it's great to have perfect defense. You'll never get there, but really wrap your head around the strategic side of what does the bad guy need to be successful, and then beat them at their own game. And they'll go away. They'll find an easier target because there's a lot of them.
You mentioned you were trolling over all the breaches and the things for last year. I mean, we know about
no life whatsoever, but yeah.
No life. You're up in Virginia. It's cold up there.
It's snowing. Yeah, it snowed its ass off this week, which I don't like snow.
It's cold down here. It's 55 degrees.
Yeah, go to
hell. But you got nothing to do anyway. You can't go outside unless you want to shovel the sidewalk. But when you're trolling through them, what was the most, outside of the big, hey, we heard about Colonial, we know that was how that happened in JBS. Tell me something that we probably don't know. What breaches that you know about?
Yeah, there was a couple
that we might know.
Well, there was a couple pretty significant ones that kind of slid under the radar that were along the very same lines as Kaseya, and along the same lines as the Microsoft side, where they worked their way into the service provider and then push stuff out. There was one that was I believe, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, it was in Canada, and it was basically almost the entire Canadian sort of infrastructure side of where they move oil and gas, very much like JBS. It was interesting that this happened right after JBS, but they did the exact same thing. And you would have thought, like, maybe those cats up there in the frozen tundra would have looked at what was going on at JBS, not JBS, but the pipeline group, Colonial, and said, well, wait a minute, we have the same thing in place. This is something we should probably fix. But they just kind of said, well, it's not us, thank God. And then they got hit pretty hard. And it slid under the news because there was so much other stuff going on in the US that no one even was like, oh, the same thing happened in Canada. Interesting. But it was almost, you could draw on a whiteboard, the two timelines, the two technologies, same stuff.
Well, you create a playbook and you execute it multiple times.
And if you're a bad guy, like oh, well, they locked us out over here. Well, guess what? There's the same stuff up north. I mean, I'm literally looking at my Shodan results from this morning, and I see 15,403 accesses that are available to me right now that are talking to Siemens controllers, which do ICS SCADA control. So pretty sure out of 15,000 results, I'd find a few that are, vulnerable.
What about the Irish healthcare system? And they got hit with a ransomware attack. They demanded ridiculous amounts of money. My wife's Irish, and the Irish people are as tight as hell. So they just don't like the Irish government says, hey, we're not paying you. We don't need medical records.
Blood from a stone. Yeah.
Yeah. let's forget this. We're not paying you. Like, my words from Calvin, they say they'd pair an apple in their pocket so they don't have to share it. Like, so they didn't pay up anyway. And then 3 months later, 6 months later, their biggest hospital in Dublin got taken down again. Yeah. So they took the centralized system down, and then their largest hospital got taken out as well, which in the same year, which is horrible, really, and especially in the middle of a pandemic. But I think, we laugh about this and we joke about it, but this is actually really hurting people because cybercrime is getting worse and worse, and no one's.
Well, it's an escalation thing, right? For the longest time, it was just bank accounts and kind of irritating people and sending dirty pictures and whatever, and then it starts to escalate a little bit to where in the recent sort of years, it's been critical infrastructure and hospitals and whatever. The next step in that chain is people start losing their life. And I mean, we've already seen a couple instances of that. There were some instances in the US where people that needed treatment were refused treatment because the hospital systems were locked down. They died in the ambulance on the way to the next hospital. So like that's going to continue to kind of grow. There was also the incident where the guy tried to dump all that chlorine into the water treatment system. Now, if that had worked, it probably wouldn't have killed people, but it would have made a lot of people really, really sick, because luckily that dilutes pretty quick. But I mean, this type of thing, the next logical step, unfortunately, not to be the harbinger of bad stuff, but the next logical step is kinetic stuff starts happening. People start losing their life.
Well, and it seems like a lot of this is difficult to measure too. You think about power grid going out. I mean, what's the implications of that? What's the crime increase at rate?
Go without the internet in my house. My kids will make you want to kill yourself. I mean, that's what.
Yeah. I mean, it's that's the same in my house. The Wi-Fi goes off, and suddenly the kids get really loud.
Yeah, it's bad.
So, but there's a lot of cause and effect that goes on there. And then the other thing is, we start talking about, and you don't even see this. A lot of this cybercrime isn't for good purposes. The money that's taken, I mean, we're talking about human trafficking, drug trafficking, weapons. When you're talking about nation states, I mean, North Korea brings so much money in ransomware attacks, and you start building weapons, and that equally has a bad outcome at the other end. So you're coming down to Zero Trust World next month. It's getting closer. Hopefully it'll be 70 degrees by then in Florida, and it won't be too cold.
I'll be there playing golf the day before. So I get my sunshine somewhere.
Yeah. So now the idea of Zero Trust World, you talk about, we want to put ourselves in the mind of the bad guys, and we kind of have this dual track going on, because we've got a lot of business owners, MSPs, who are coming in and trying to understand, how do they grow their business, how do they make use of security. So we want to focus on helping them understand how to sell security to their clients, how to educate their clients better, how to build service desks. But on the cool side, or at least for me, the cool side is we get to break shit. So I know you're going to do a keynote there. You got any ideas of what you want to do and what you want to play with?
Yeah, I'm going to try and bring the drone that I used to use when I was doing red teaming, and I'm going to try and do two things with it. One, use that drone as a control thing for basically, taking over the Wi-Fi. People never think. I used to do all the time. I'd land the drone on your roof, connect to the network, and then pipe traffic out to my car out in Taco Bell parking lot. And no one ever looked for it. I literally had a security guy one time go, "Man, that's a cool drone," and I landed on the roof. "Yeah, thanks, dude," and sat in the car. And then the other thing is, I have a program that you can kill a drone in flight, which is pretty slick, because those things are just little flying web servers, and you're just DOSing it as it's flying. Hopefully, no one's underneath it, but we'll try and do that.
Injure anyone.
Yeah, right. We'll do it where no one gets a drone in the skull. But those
apparently Verizon and AT&T have something that will kill a Boeing 787 in flight too. It's called a 5G.
Yeah.
So, which is a little bit scary, that a 5G tower signal can cause that much danger, because you might have some bad guys.
You would have thought they would have thought of that before they built them, but I mean, okay.
Yeah. It's like 5G. It's gonna bring autonomous driving, autonomous flying.
Right. Except for we can fly. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the other things we're going to do is OMG cables, rubber duckies, Metasploit. And I feel like Metasploit's a bit boring nowadays, because people who get hacked by Metasploit, they probably should have been patching their systems. But
yeah,
still see it a lot.
Well, we can also probably fire up some Cobalt Strike. A lot of people probably hear about that in the news and are not sure what Cobalt Strike is, but Cobalt Strike's pretty slick. I've been using that for like a decade, and it gives you all kinds of fun stuff to play with.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. Oh, there you go. Someone says G stands for grounded.
That's marketing gold. Yeah, you should send that to AT&T. Yeah.
You know what's terrible about society? I'm not scared of the flights being crashing into the ground. I'm scared about not being able to get on a plane when I need to. So that's what's terrible about the way our mind works. Like, oh, my flights are going to be delayed. 1,100 flights a day are going to be cancelled.
Yeah, yeah.
But hey, my cell signal is going to be better.
Yeah, well, you'll be able to watch Netflix while you sit in the terminal waiting for your flight.
It's good news. While you're down here, so we're going to do the rubber duckies. You're gonna talk about security. You've obviously got quite an impressive background. I know a lot of people here know who you are. We've done enough webinars, but maybe if you want to talk a little bit about what you've done in the past.
Yeah, sure. So I'm retired Navy. I was a cryptologic chief. I did a bunch of support stuff for a lot of really high speed individuals. I'll leave it at that. 3-letter agencies, that type of deal. I worked for the government after I retired. Then I was a forester analyst, which I think now I can say I'm a recovering forester analyst, because after you come out of that job, you have to go through recovery. And then recently I've just been doing lots of consulting stuff on my own. So it's been a fun ride. And I think you guys are going to have some books down there as well to hand out. So
yeah, we've got your new book. I'm trying to remember what it's called now, because I had a copy around here. So my mind's fine. Your new book, actually. If you are attending Zero Trust World, Chase will be there. We've got a bunch of other cool speakers in there as well, including the CISO of JetBlue.
We'll see if we can get some folks to take a photo with the championship belt.
The Zero Trust World champion, yeah.
It's the world champion belt, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should do set up a ring there, Chase. I'm not getting in there.
Bring it on. I'd be down for that. That'd be fun.
So see if you can knock out Chase. Maybe we'll just stick to the keyboard knockouts.
Yeah. I don't think I'd be in the same weight class as most people. So
yeah, we're gonna have to consume a lot of alcohol before that happens. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of fun, and I think you're doing some book signings, giving away some books there as well. So
yeah, it's going to be a blast.
Got to read the new one, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, any excuse we have now to get out of the house, like I can't. I would walk to Orlando if they told me I had to walk to get there now, just to get the hell out of my house. So sign me up, I'm there.
Yeah, well, looking forward to having you there. Any other thoughts about 2022? Where do you think the biggest threats are going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see a lot more in the healthcare space over the course of this year. I think you're going to see some more critical infrastructure stuff. Unfortunately, I'm willing to make the prediction that we see a notable loss of human life somewhere this year based on a cyber specific event. Maybe that will be the wake up call that's finally going to get people up on the hill to respond to this, but. It's until that happens, it's still going to kind of be, interesting cyber or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately it's a lot of par for the course, and that's not where we want to be. So we should be doing better.
Yeah. So healthcare, unfortunately, human life lost because of it. I think healthcare, you're right. It scares me how much healthcare is underserved. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's a similar situation to the Colonial Pipeline. You've got the good old boys on the board, and instead of the drilling guys, you've got the doctors, which, in my day, we used to pen and nobody could read our handwriting. And it makes it very hard for them to focus on security. But I know healthcare, I think, is going to be a big target. I think the other thing is, obviously, we're going to see more applications. We're going to see more vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities are going to become bigger hops. And hopefully we don't have another Kaseya event where we have a major number of people hit by one software vulnerability in one weekend. But equally, it would be it's important to understand that we're probably going to have a lot more software vulnerabilities. I did see a question pop up here. Oh no, someone's just actually saying that we have copies of your book for the event.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
It wasn't even a question.
It was Liz. She's on point.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions before we end out, I mean, feel free to drop them in the chat or throw them in the Q&A, and we'll try and answer them the best way we can. If you're not already coming to Zero Trust World, really recommend it. If you go to ThreatLocker.com, click on Zero Trust World. It is really a great event. Lots of fun, lots of things to do. 2.5 days of hacking, learning, great speakers. And I'm looking forward to Chase's keynote again. And it will be great fun. And also, just a quick note: if you have booked a ticket for Zero Trust World, we are mailing out T-shirts. Make sure you put the right size in. We mailed you an extra small. Is that right, Chase?
Yeah. I asked for the baby size. That's what I want. I want a onesie. Yeah.
Actually, you joke about that. We actually really have some cool baby grows that say Cyber Baby on the back.
Nice.
So, but the so if you have already signed up for Zero Trust World, just take your picture with your T-shirt doing something cool. Like the more likes you get on our LinkedIn page, so take a picture, post us on LinkedIn or Facebook, tag us in it, tag Zero Trust World. We're going to enter you into a draw. The more likes the more entries you get into that draw. Very few people have posted T-shirts. We just added a PlayStation, I think, to one of our prizes we're giving away. We've got like a $5,000 projector, and we've got some other cool prizes. So if you come in, make sure you post those T-shirt pictures on social media with you doing something cool. Jump out of a plane with a parachute. So that will get you a lot of likes. I promise. I will like it 50 times over.
I would do that if someone would jump out of a plane. Yeah.
Yeah, wearing the small T-shirt.
Right. Wearing the onesie. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did have actually one question. And if you want to expand a bit more on what loss of life through cyber attacks means.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've seen a couple of instances of, like you say, people being turned away by hospitals. We've seen a couple of instances of folks not being able to get treatment because of a system being down, which has led to kind of a tertiary loss of life. I think that this year, based on the stuff that's going on in Ukraine, I think we're seeing China ramp up some activities. There's starting to be a lot of, I guess you'd call it, boiling below the surface. I think that we'll see some sort of attack that specifically invokes a loss of human life. Maybe it won't be on the scale of hundreds, but it would be enough where it's noteworthy. I mean, honestly, any one person's life loss is a tragedy, but where we're looking at is, I think we will see over the course of the next 12 months, some sort of incident where we can say directly a cyber thing caused people to die. And that's going to be a real watershed moment.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing a lot more with attacks is coordinated attacks. So if you think about hospitals, especially in Europe, where you're relying on health services, if you can take out 2 or 3 hospitals at the same time, it becomes, and these guys are doing this so they can get efficiency on getting paid, because at some point you get paid, then that actually increases the risk of people dying and then people paying ransoms, which is what a lot of these guys do. But also, if you start thinking back to the 1940s and you think about Enigma, and frankly, that was good intelligence and good cyber hacking. And yes, it was breaking codes. We think about the same when you talk about borders in Ukraine and Russia and potential cyber intelligence and getting into governments allowing people to attack, understanding where defenses are. Then we start talking about bigger numbers, and hopefully that doesn't happen. And I'm not sure we'd even know if those details happen when you think about borders and controls and someone hacking in and figuring out where people are. And in some cases, those hacks are necessary, but in other cases, when you're on the wrong side of it, your intelligence gets leaked. And I don't think we're ever going to know, or at least until records become declassified for whatever the waiting period is, the damage of the SolarWinds Orion attack in the US.
Yeah, I think it's 85 years. So you and I will be dust by then, but it is what it is.
Someone's gonna have to mail me a copy on my grave or something. Just leave it there. What really happened? So, but okay, well, I appreciate you joining me today, Chase. Look forward to seeing you again next month. In Zero Trust World. And everyone, thank you for your time. If you're not already using ThreatLocker, or you'd like to look at a demo of ThreatLocker, I'm just going to post in in the chat here a link to book a demo, and we will show you on keyboard. Apparently my keyboard doesn't work. That's ThreatLocker.
Mine works.
There you go. I've just put a link in there, so feel free to click onto that link and book a demo, and we'll show you how ThreatLocker works. If you haven't already booked tickets, go to threatlocker.com and book a ticket for Zero Trust World. It'll be worth it. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. And Chase, good to talk to you again.
Have a good one.